Chapter 13, Mooring. Date 73. Mystique and I talked every day, then met for a brief bite. He was driving his daughter's truck. Her bumper sticker read, "Something witchy this way comes." It startled me. I mentioned it. He shrugged and asked what I knew about witches. I had no answer, sensing that anything I said he would nix as dogma rather than research. Well, I wasn't trying to date the daughter. Did it really matter? His vibe, mellow and relaxed, led to a nice lunch date. We had talked about family. He said it was really important to him. He had 6 kids, 3 lived with him, and he had no problem being a father figure to my sons who, at 23, still needed a man's guidance, he said. I agreed. In fact, my heart was singing. It looked like a great start. He called as I was taking my son Elijah to Bush Intercontinental to rent a vehicle the next day. I answered my phone's ring, but then proceeded to tell Mystique I'd call him right back. I was excited. This was no everyday drive. This was a rite of passage. Elijah and his college friends were going on a short road trip. I would drop them off and pick them up when they returned in a few days. They didn't want to drive their unreliable cars or board them at the airport. As I helped my son make sure he had everything for the trip and didn't leave anything in my car, I could barely restrain the joy I felt at the little part I played in helping my son have an experience I never had. But when I called Mystique back minutes later, expecting to share my excitement, he was fuming. How dare I prioritize helping my son over his call? He wanted to see me tonight. I should be available to him, waiting on his call, wanting to see what he had planned for our evenings. These kids whose mothers coddled them, always checking to see if they had handled their business, were immature, and it was the fault of women like me. I wasn't offended. His words and behavior were so far off my grid of acceptable that I simply said, "My kids and I are obviously not what you're looking for," and I hung up mid-rant and blocked his number. I was proud of myself. I wasn't that girl from 1995 rebuilding myself for a man's approval. I had my flaws, but helping my son be prepared for a trip wasn't one of them. I was a little disappointed. I thought he was more evolved, not a Neanderthal in disguise. And I had partially, not really, stopped dating Gatsby to be with him. But Mystique was not the only reason. I could have written a book on reasons Gatsby and I shouldn't date. November was here, Thanksgiving around the corner, and my mom was sick. Sicker than we ever could have imagined. Turns out she had hepatitis, which had gone untreated for about 30 years, and now the damage was showing in her organs, showing all throughout her body. She was given 3 months to live. With a diagnosis like that, you go through all the stages of grief: denial, bargaining, anger. I took an intermittent leave of absence. My sister did too, and I told Mom I'd stop doing the shows. "No, you won't." "I have to." "No, you don't. I spent almost my entire life as a businesswoman, as did your grandfather, your great uncle. It's in your blood. I sent you to the high school for business professions." I remember learning nothing about business there. "I tried to get you to sell Avon, Mary Kay, insurance, lingerie, prearranged funerals, Amway, and Tupperware. You never would. You've had your DBA for 4 months. You've already done 11 shows, sold out a few times, got a buzz. Maybe it's beginner's luck. Maybe you found an unserved niche. Maybe you found what you were born to do. If you stop, you go back to less than 0. You won't be able to pick back up where you are now. You can cut back, but it took me 30 odd years to get you into business. You will not quit." "Yes, ma'am." "You will do what business owners have always done. Separate personal and business. Be fully present when you're there, setting all this aside, and be fully present when you're here." The first show, I'd stated rule number 1 of Laughs and Lyrics: leave the outside, outside. The show was started as my haven from stress, an artistic cocoon from the outside world. In those 4 walls, I welcomed, nurtured, and vibed with my tribe, young and old, all races, ages, and creeds, all backgrounds, tied by one thing: love and honor for laughs and the lyrics of comedy, music, and poetry. Now, that rule took on a whole new significance, a promise to my mother. The entrepreneurial spirit in our family would not die with her. It would live on through me. It was a high bar and a hard promise to keep. Conversely, it also provided self-care. For at least 2 hours a month, I could forget the debilitating signs of her disease, the side effects of her medications, the deterioration of her health. There are no words to express watching someone vibrant, a powerhouse of energy, a force in the community, an entrepreneur with 8 DBAs, an involved grandmother and doting mother wither and decay. It's even harder to express the personality changes that occur as the liver and kidneys fail and toxins flood the blood, temporarily causing mood swings, violence, confusion, and chemically induced dementia. It was even harder because I'd seen it before. When my son was shot, he too went from the body of a 22-year-old to a bitter, PTSD-ridden, paranoid shell. He was out of his head on pain meds, saying things, doing things, remembering nothing. Now that screaming, raving, fighting person was my mother, not understanding why she had an IV in her arm, why she was getting a shot, not understanding the treatments, begging, pleading, crying for us to stop, not knowing who we were. My sister dealt with it more than I did. She lived 5 minutes away. I lived almost an hour distant. But there were days when the memories, the screams wouldn't stop playing in my head. Nights when they invaded my dreams and woke me up. There were days I sat at her bedside in the hospital or hospice or her home. I would suddenly see nothing, hear nothing, feel nothing. I was floating above my body watching the scene, or floating off in the clouds, or just in a field of great emptiness. Disassociation, they call it. In my 20s, when my flashbacks of rape came back, I disassociated, spacing out, losing time. I spent 6 months in therapy learning how to feel the flashback coming on, prepare for it, change something in it to make it less terrifying so that I didn't disassociate. I went back to therapy. Images of the Jennifer Lopez movie, The Cell, felt like a very real possibility, trapped in my head, catatonic, unresponsive, disassociated. It's kind of scary to distrust your own mind, your own subconscious, to know that if things become too intense, they can and will leave you. Awareness gone. Your identity submerged in nothing for a moment or 10 or an hour, to lose time. November faded into December, and then New Year's Eve, at the stroke of midnight, 2019, my phone rang. "Happy New Year, stranger." "My mother's dying," I replied, and hung the phone up on Gatsby, and fell into his arms when he rang my doorbell 30 minutes later. Messy, January 3rd, 2019, dedicated to those like my mom who face a terminal illness. I crave clean lines, cream walls with paintings and frames, but sometimes life is messy, bipolar, insane. I crave a fresh fade and cologne with a goatee to match, stylish and classic, and swagger that's brash, a seductive wink, a smile 1,000 watts strong, a masculine voice, some good taste in songs, a head bob to rhythms, some smooth feet, and then love-making breathless, no need to pretend. It's all pristine and spotless, but don't you run if some messiness seeps in while we're having some fun. A hospital visit, skilled nurse no less, a few payday loans, some gray hairs from stress. I'd promise just good times, but that be a lie. Both bitter and sweet, fragrances pie. Life is messy, confusing, overwhelming, it seems. Some false starts, some pipe dreams, some laughter, some screams. But it's also beauty and hope and loving galore. Don't let messiness keep you from what's in store. I used to think life could be carefully designed, planned like a blueprint, all sketched out and lined. But so little has gone the way that it should. But maybe the messy is what makes life good. I didn't have any expectations when I said those words. I think I partly said them because I couldn't deal with all that was going on, and Gatsby too. I hadn't said those words many times. In fact, I wonder if I'd said them ever. The announcement just happened. And that